And I want to turn it over to you, Dr. Chang.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I know it's a busy time of school year, and I hope you all are safe and warm where you are. I just first wanted to start with an introduction. So my name is Florence Chang, and I work at the Kentucky Department of Education in a new group that you may not be aware of. It was not even here a year ago. So it's the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging team. We're in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And just a quick, if you have a second, to just put in the chat kind of the reason why you chose this session. So I'm kind of curious if there's any specific reason, if something is happening in your district, or just that you are curious about equity initiatives. So anything you've got in the chat that you have, you can definitely just put in the chat, and I'll try to address it. And just get to know you all, because we're not like a huge group. So it's nice to actually, see faces and talk to you all about this. And I want to make it meaningful for you. Yes, I love that. Equity is something that's ongoing and so needed. We do know, I will just share, after the pandemic, we are seeing that the kids, we knew gaps existed before the pandemic between groups, the have and the have-nots, especially between economically disadvantaged and more affluent families, as well as lots of disparities by race, special education, English learners. So there's so many groups of students that we've been thinking and worried about even before the pandemic. And one of the things that we've learned since the pandemic is that those gaps have actually gotten larger, unfortunately. And what happened during the pandemic is a lot of students that didn't have the resources, their parents, their families could not supplement the missed instruction that was happening, as well as the trauma that was happening around the COVID. So we know that this is something that has only been exacerbated. So what I want to kind of share with you today is two things primarily. So one is just a data tool around something that you may already know about. So the Equity Dashboard, it is a tool that's available through Infinite Campus. And then an opportunity about what's something that KDE is offering free to districts. So that's one thing that's really important, free to districts and schools, if they want to continue kind of deepening the conversation and work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I just want to share that opportunity with you. There's also going to be a Google form if you want more information, or you just want to even go ahead and sign up. The initiative is called the Equity Playbook, and that starts next year. Cohort 3, we actually have 2 cohorts already happening. So hopefully leave you with one, a tool, to a initiative if you are interested, and then give you, have time to answer questions. I already see, yes, the Equity Dashboard is free. So when I get to that, I will definitely show you how to access it. It is free for all KDE schools, as well as the Equity Playbook, which is kind of a coaching model that is also free. And we're recruiting participants. Okay, and I'm looking at some of the other pieces in the chat, how to lead equity work, yes, and classroom walkthrough tools. So hopefully I can help answer some of those questions during the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And this is, again, informal, so please feel free to jump in with any thoughts, or just start talking. And if you have a question, I'm happy to answer that. So one thing to be aware of, you have access to this presentation. So if you need to jump off early, or you get a phone call or anything, just know you can go to tinyurl.com/P3equity. That will get you to the presentation, along with my contact information at the end if you need it. So feel free to download that because it's a short session. So I just want to make sure you have that. Okay, so first thing I want to do is just share with you all that a little bit about our department. And so, let me get this into presentation mode. It's kind of, let's see. There you go. Okay, so again, like I mentioned before, we are relatively new. So I wanted to just share with you, the Kentucky Board of Education has a resolution commitment to racial equity. So that was all the way in July 2020. But it's taken about a year and a half to build the team that is working on that specifically. So we have our chief equity officer, and he's also our deputy commissioner, Dr. Woods Tucker, and Dr. Damian Sweeney, who I report to. He's the director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And then we have a couple of KDE staff as well as regional coordinators. So if you're familiar with your regional co-ops, there's somebody in every region that works in DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And our vision and mission for this, and it's so important because I think this is the precursor to any classroom, any school, is that every student and educator in Kentucky feels a sense of belonging. So when people ask things like, okay, I have a classroom walkthrough tool, what do we do to kind of deepen equity work? The first thing I would ask is, how was that walkthrough designed? Was it designed with the input of your staff? Is it a walkthrough instrument selected from a national database, research tool? But knowing that the educators in the classroom have to feel that there's a purpose to that walkthrough and understand how it will help them. I think that's what we mean by when we say a sense of belonging. So a sense of belonging in every way. And we know our educators, one of the things that people may not realize is that sense of belonging for educators is lower than for students. So if we look at the impact survey from last year, and we asked our educators, do you feel a sense of belonging? That's actually lower than our kids. So we know that the adults that we're working with actually are struggling maybe as much or more than our students. So just be aware that our team is here to help you. If you are leaving this session and you're like, we're not really working on sense of belonging a whole lot, definitely reach out to me because we have some resources and trainings that we can offer. But we start with sense of belonging as kind of our foundation for all the work that we're doing. And so you'll see on the screen a lot of initiatives. When you get the PowerPoint, just, you can definitely read through these. We are rooted in the definitions. So again, if this is something that you all are trying to work on in your schools and districts, share definitions of what does it mean when we say diversity. And one of the first things we've had to share with people is diversity is not just race. It is so much more than race, and race is absolutely at the forefront of many of the concerning data points that we see, but it's not the only. And so even if you have two people in the same room, you have diversity. I know I have two daughters. They are so different than each other. They are different learning styles, different ways that they approach school, different things that motivate them. So that's an example, right? So if you have kids in your family, I'm sure you can relate, like everybody is different, the way they approach the world and life. And so that's what we mean, understanding those individual differences and traits. And that lens is so important for how they see school. And so we talk about that in our trainings. So diversity, kind of coming up with that shared understanding, the equity piece, which is promotion of access and opportunity. So knowing that not every kid has or needs the same things. They need different things to be successful. And that is clear if you walk into two schools, two classrooms, you see that some kids need a mechanical pencil. Some kids need the triangle pencil because they need to, for motor. And so simple things like that can show you that equity in promotion of access is one of the key areas that we work on. And of course, look at your classroom makeup. If you go into your self-contained classes for special education versus your advanced coursework, what does it even look like visibly? Is it different by race? Is it different by gender? You see all sorts of differences when you look at different classrooms. And then inclusion is that intentional act of actually trying to address these disparities, the actions that you put into place to address the equity disparities. And then if you work on all these things, honoring diversity, recognizing the promotion of equity, and then acting on strategies that help build on that, what you're going to get at the end is this sense of belonging. So that's the kind of the logic model for working on this. So I definitely encourage, if you go back to your school classrooms, PLCs, this is something of a set of definitions that you can definitely start with. So we have a lot of different initiatives that you can see on this, but I am only going to talk about two things today, the dashboard and the playbook. And these are going to be super quick overviews. But again, I'm here to help if you have any more questions on this. So with the dashboard, what this is, it's a dashboard, data dashboard that uses something called risk ratios. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Like, what is a risk ratio? It's a way to examine the equity outcomes between different student groups. And so when I worked in a district prior to KDE, I was in Jefferson County. I know it was really hard to kind of calculate this. There's a lot of math in terms of pulling your denominator of kids and then looking at other groups and trying to figure out, like, is there a disparity between one group of students and another? And this dashboard will help you do that really quickly. And it's color coded, which I really love. So you don't have to think about it. You just look at the dot color and it tells you where you might see inequities. Where you find it. So the equity dashboard, you log into Infinite Campus. And then when you go there, under your name on the left side, there's something called Tableau Visualizations. And when you click on that, it will take you to the Student Equity Dashboard. If you do not see it, it means you do not have permissions yet. So you will need to talk to your district Infinite Campus administrator. Unfortunately, because we want to just give access to everyone, but because the data does drill down to groups under 10, then it is sensitive. So that's why a district level permission has to be made in order for you to access. So a risk ratio is comparing the likelihood of an event occurring for one group to the likelihood of the event occurring for another group. And if it's disproportional, then this one group is considered at risk. So I would compare it to something like, if you're familiar with things like crime statistics, when they say something is happening per 1,000 citizens. This is something that controls for the number of kids that you have in a student group. So for example, if you have 50 Asian kids, but 500 white kids, it's going to look at what's happening proportionally within those groups. So you might have 20% of Asian kids are showing something versus 30% of white children. And if you compare those two, it controls for their denominators being different, but their likelihood, that percentage is different from each other. And so there's two ways you can be at risk. You can be overrepresentation in something, which means you are more likely to show up for a category that we don't want to see, like suspensions or chronic absenteeism, that kind of variable, versus being underrepresented, which is you're less likely to show up in a group that we want you to be in. So being proficient or being in advanced classes or gifted, talented, those are all things that we look for. So these are just the variables that are in the dashboard. So we look at overrepresentation in special education, identification, chronically absent, out of school and in school suspension, and then underrepresentation in all these different areas here. And then in terms of what groups do we actually compare? So we compare all the different racial groups that are Infinite Campus. We also look at groups like you can filter by gender, by economically disadvantaged, by English learner, foster, and so on. There's lots of different options here. And this is what it looks like. So This is sample data, and basically what you see is, in this particular case, an out-of-school suspension and an in-school suspension. You see those orange dots. The orange dots tell you that there is disproportionality in this variable. So in this particular case, I just want to highlight, it says Black students are 3.68 times more likely to be receiving an out-of-school suspension as non-Black students. That's actually pretty close to what the real data is for the state. So this was a snapshot from last year. But basically, that's how this dashboard works. As you look at the different, so here's a better view of it. As you look at the different variables, you can see that there are some orange dots here, but a lot are in blue. So blue indicates that there is not significant disproportionality in that area. But you can see here with the orange dots, this is again real data at the state level. We do see disproportionality by race in out of school and in school suspensions. We also see that with access to advanced coursework and gifted and talented, again, a lot of orange dots here in terms of which race groups by race are not getting access to the coursework, advanced coursework, or to the gifted talented program, or completing CTE. For example, when you log into your district or your school, you'll be able to see the data for your specific context. And again, you don't have to run this by race. There's an option in the filters to run it by other groups. And then the final screen to show you here is the data by academic achievement. So this is using our state test scores. So again, real data here, and you'll see, it's kind of a theory of action or a logic model as you progress through these, as kids do not, if they're being excluded from school because of discipline, or they're chronically absent, they're missing instruction, and then they're not getting access to certain programming like gifted and talented, advanced coursework, well, then this is the result. So the result would be there is definitely going to be disparities then in the outcomes in the learning. So all of that kind of, as you all know, it's all correlated with each other. So now what? If you have the data, then what do you do with it? So we always advocate there's more. The data is just the beginning of the conversation. That is not where you stop. You start with digging deeper into any kind of variable. So if you are working, which many of us are, if you're working on something that's been pervasive, so year after year, it's the same data and we're having trouble, this is where we say, okay, it's time to just stop and think about a couple of things. One is root causes. So what are some root causes that could be leading to this problem that we have not yet maybe understood fully because we're not seeing that variable change? And then looking at evidence-based practices. So what has shown to be impactful? So one of the things that we always advocate in our team, in our division, is voice data. So again, take the equity dashboard data, look at your impact data from your educators, or look at the data from surveys. So this is one where we see disparities happening in discipline. And so when we pulled the data in the quality of school climate and quality and safety survey, which is, if you don't know what that is, let me know. That's off the school report card. So kids take a survey every time they take the state assessment. And let's look at that. Like, what are students saying? So in this particular case, if you look at 2021 and 2022, you'll see go to middle school and Black students, what we're seeing is 71% agreed that students were treated the same if they broke the rules. That dropped to 58% this past year at the state level. So it's already giving us an indication that the experience of students, the perception of students are different by race. And that's more actionable than, let's say, just knowing that there's a disparity in out of school suspension. So now we know there's something about the climate and environment, the communication, the support systems, the either PBIS or whatever model they're using in different schools at the middle school level, that Black students are feeling like the rules are not fair. And so is it implicit bias? Is it something related to certain classrooms? We don't know, but it gives you some indication that something needs to be addressed at the climate and culture experience level. So I told you that we were going to also talk about an opportunity that you all are invited to join, which is this equity playbook. And so a lot of times people are still, many of us are still kind of stuck in the world of the data around equity and inequities is so intractable and feels very daunting. And so one of the tools that I just wanted to share with you, initiatives that KDE is offering, is something called the Equity Playbook. And it's an initiative that offers personalized coaching. So coaching is something that has shown to be really effective in research and evaluation, that, the kind of quick professional developments where you go in and it's great information, but then you get back to your real world and you're like, I didn't get to actually follow, through on some of their suggestions on what we can do better or different or try anything. Sometimes I've been in that world where you just don't have, you go to great learning opportunities and you don't have a chance to really follow up. That's what this is trying to help with. It's coaching. So saying, if you're interested in being coached by somebody on a problem of practice related to equity, that is what this is about. And you can do it individually, at the school level, at the district level. We have about 300 people already joined this past year. And you get a real coach. You get someone coming to your school and talking to you. And it's someone that I'm actually being coached myself. So we're all being coached here at KDE as well. And she is wonderful, my coach. She comes out and talks to me about my problem of practice and how I can deepen my work around equity. And we have teachers as well as principals doing this. So lots of different groups trying this. It is a commitment. It's a commitment of meeting with your coach. So you would be meeting them 5 times a year, either in person or virtually, and they would help you address the equity pillars, any of the equity pillars. And so there's a video here. If you end up downloading this presentation, you can learn a little bit more and see it in action. Boone County is actually one of our largest participants. So they were gracious enough to let us film there. So there's a video here. But here are the 5 equity pillars. So when I say problem of practice, it's really just selecting one of the areas under this umbrella, and almost anything you work on is related to one of these areas. So a lot of people in our first cohort are starting with, not surprisingly, student achievement and culture and climate and discipline. Those are 3 very popular ones, but definitely instructional resources. If you are interested in deepening instruction by looking at things like curriculum, diversity in curriculum materials, things like that, that would fall under, that's where the walkthrough instrument would probably fall under there. If you are interested in signing up for that initiative, this is a Google form that you can use, and my contact is right here. So you can reach out to me if you're not ready to sign up, but you have some questions. I'm happy to answer those. I'm going to go back right to the beginning. So you all, anybody that joined late, I just want to make sure you all know you can download this presentation again at tinyurl.com/P3 equity. So that is kind of a quick, super quick overview of those 2 things. But I wanted to leave some time just in case you all have any follow-up questions, any suggestions for me in terms of what other things we could be looking at in our division. So I'll open it up. Any questions, or what are your all thoughts?
And you can feel free to unmute your mic, or you can use the chat and we'll make sure. I think we can both see it now. Um, so just to kind of kick it off, I'm curious about the Infinite Campus, like
Mhm.
the visualization part of it. What kind of feedback are you getting from folks around that? Is it's because I know a couple are looking at, there was a question about revamping like a walkthrough instrument and, those kind of things. Like, are you seeing any people kind of take just those quick visualizations and being able to drop some of that evidence into, say, a walkthrough or some kind of actionable step they could take?
Yeah, so definitely can be used in your closing the achievement gap plan. So if you're familiar, or in the closing the achievement gap portion of your CSIP. So if you work on that at your school, some people are using the equity dashboard. Just the risk ratios is like a monitoring. Like we have, for example, let's say this group of students is 3 times more likely to be suspended. In 6 months, we're going to check it again, and then a year, we're going to check it again, and hopefully that ratio has declined. So you might say it's going to decline by 50% or whatever you think is reasonable. So yeah, you can do it for goal setting. I think it's good if you don't know where to start, or people are pushing back, because we do hear people go, well, everybody's having trouble, sometimes they don't realize how big the disparities are between our groups. It's a good place to get people to come to some agreements on, do we all agree that looking at this data, if you see the same group having issue screen after screen, domain after domain, then that's a problem. If this one group of students is chronically absent and being suspended, and they don't get gifted and talented, and it's like that combination is so disturbing when you put it all together, that there are groups of students missing out at both the behavior level, the access level, and the outcome level. And that's a place to start a conversation with your community. If you don't feel like there's buy-in yet, which we have seen, there's sometimes not complete buy-in, that equity is a problem.
Florence, I kind of have a question. I work with individuals wanting to go through like principal prep, and I teach a diverse learners course. And so I have them do a project with equity mapping. And one of them actually told me that their school didn't purchase it. So I'm so glad you clarified that it's free for every KDE school. So I know for going forward to use it. But my question would be like, dealing with like people who are interested in going in that role and getting people more exposed to the power of the software that's in Infinite Campus. Like, what are some ways that I can leverage that? Because I don't have access, obviously, for particular reasons, to get in there and show them everything that they can do. Like, what would be some suggestions that you could give for those that are like looking to become leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually were just talking about this earlier, that's kind of one of our number one biggest problems, is people even knowing that it exists, and how do they know? So it really goes back to the professional development system that's in the HR world or in the district's PL office, professional learning office. So I think number one, it could be great for in any kind of onboarding process at the district level. And secondly, built into the professional learning that happens, especially if somebody is working in DEI work, they, would automatically get this. Now at the pre-service level, that is much more difficult, because people, it takes a coordination between the higher ed group and the district, so the partnership district, to make sure that that's shared within the pre-service messaging. But I do think the more messaging we can get out, either through pre-service, then maybe there needs to be just an Infinite Campus like primer, just to help people go, oh, okay, what is Infinite Campus again? And hear all the things it does. I actually haven't seen anybody do that very explicitly. So I think that is an opportunity gap right now that we have not yet fully addressed.
Yeah, just talking with some principals that are new, or like finishing their certification while they're in the role, there's a lot of data mining that they're doing on their own that like Infinite Campus does for them. And so like that's where I was just kind of curious is like, you know, like I understand the complexities, but like even like a sandbox of fake data that is accessible for us to use with pre-service people to kind of just really do exactly what you're talking about would be phenomenal.
I'll bring up the sandbox again. They tried it once and they didn't feel like there were enough users. So if you could like drop your email in the chat, I'll definitely look into it and, you know, follow up. And I know we're over because there's another session coming in. So but yes, I appreciate you all. Like, those are great questions. Please do feel free to reach out to me if you have. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Murray State. Awesome.